afternoon. My name is Ann Paduska, and I work in the Central Career Services office in Barnes Hall.
Hi, my name is Lori Gillespie, and I'm a career advisor in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences.
And we're really happy that you came here this afternoon to learn a little bit more about informational interviewing. So just to do a quick survey, how many of you are freshmen? Okay, sophomores? Juniors? Okay, seniors? Any master's students? Any PhDs? And any postdocs?
Okay, great. So Anne and I are also a little bit curious about what are you hoping to glean from this workshop today? What's willing to offer? What brought you here? What are you hoping to glean? You're coming with some questions that you're wondering about this process of information interviewing. Anyone? Yes. Absolutely. So this young man is very interested in how to ask valuable questions that will really get out some valuable information for him when information interviewing. So we'll certainly talk about that. How about others of you? Yes. How would you follow up? That's always a huge question, not only related to how do I go about conducting one of these things called an information interview, but how do I go about following up? And even perhaps thinking about having an ongoing communication or exchange, or even perhaps a bit of a relationship with someone. So absolutely. Yes, sir.
What's expected?
What is expected? Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
What the employer is expecting when you set that up and what we should be expecting from it.
Sure. So,
As that perspective, you do that when you're looking to ask for a job.
okay, so we're going to talk about sort of expectations of what an information interview is, what kind of information what an information interview might yield, and sort of how to go about managing expectations realistically. So those are all things that Ann and I are absolutely prepared to talk with you about today. We thought we would begin by, let's just take a look at defining what is an information interview. So in a nutshell, it's a networking tool, a method, an interactive way to learn about career-related things. You might have questions about a particular career field. Should I be majoring in as a prelude to considering a career in? There might be a myriad of questions that you have related to things that will guide your career-related thinking as a student here at Cornell. It's a tremendous tool to begin to learn about not only a particular industry, but individual employers within an industry, types of positions in various career fields that could be a good fit for you. An excellent way, and a very interactive way to gather information. The actual information interview is a process, and it's a process of conducting what we think of as these exploratory conversations with people. And the information that you glean from those exploratory conversations is essentially going to be very effective at guiding some next steps in whatever point in the process you're at. Whether it is trying to make decisions related to how you want to use your undergraduate or graduate experience as a way to influence what that first step beyond Cornell is going to be, or whether or not you are actually looking to gather very specific, concrete suggestions related to your job search. So the actual information interview is a process of conducting exploratory conversations. Information interviews are, in a nutshell, an absolutely fabulous way to gather information. You do not want, the expectation for this process is that you are going to, at the end of the conversation, be armed with far more information to guide your next step than you were prior to the conversation. Information interviews also offer an opportunity to begin to, you are of course connecting with someone, typically in person, sometimes by phone, to conduct the information interview. And through that process of connecting with people, you can't help but begin to cultivate a relationship with someone. And through cultivating a relationship with that person, you will hopefully be able to come back to that person, perhaps tap into his or her network, And it's just a tremendous opportunity to be able to do that. In the process of having this information exchange, you also are making an impression on the person that you're interacting with, and can be an optimal way for the person you're meeting with down the road to develop confidence in mentioning your name to a hiring manager if a position does become available at some point. Or to a colleague who mentioned in a staff meeting that morning that they're looking to hire an intern for the summer. So it's your opportunity also through this information gathering mission to be able to begin to make an impression with the person or people that you're meeting with. And the other thing is it's a really practical way to be able to tap into someone's colleagues and contacts, and perhaps even to learn about potential opportunities. Information interviewing is a very strategic way for you to be proceeding to gather information. You're talking with people who are in the field at the moment. The information is up to date, it's accurate, it's interactive. It can be, again, a very effective way to begin to build a professional network as you are looking to navigate both your undergraduate experience as well as your graduate experience at Cornell. And a great way to begin to evaluate not only whether or not a career field could be a good fit for you, but an individual organization. And through conversations can really help you begin to evaluate whether or not you want to follow through on applying for a particular position, completing a job application, and all of that. Think about the information interview also for people who might be using an information interview as a tool to help develop a job search strategy, as that exchange is the equivalent of you really doing some very important market research as a prelude to applying for jobs, and to really guide your strategy and how you're going to approach your job search, what resources you're going to use, what your timing is going to be, who people are that you want to be reaching out to. So it's really, really essential that you think about information interviewing as conversations that are a prelude to a step that you want to take in either your career exploration process or perhaps your job search process. When should you conduct an information interview?
And so the answer is indeed any time. So how many of you are near the end of your degree program? You? Okay. So why do you think you might want to conduct an informational interview? What purpose would it serve?
You could build connections with organizations you hope to work with in the future.
Okay, so building connections with potential organizations to work with. What else? How would that be? Any other thoughts? None. You're expecting us to tell you everything. All right, well, we're going to deliver. So these are just a few suggestions of ways that you could use informational interviewing at the end of your degree program. So there's actually a lot of overlap if you're in the beginning or the middle of your degree program. So, for example, sometimes you might want to establish contacts with people because you are interested in working with that organization. And let's say that you do end up applying for a job and you want to send your application to a real person. If you have a good relationship with that person, then you could say, oh, I just applied for this job. Do you happen to know who the hiring manager is? Because I'd like to forward my application on to them. You can also learn about upcoming job opportunities. So let's say you're talking to someone at an organization that you really, really want to work for, but they don't have any jobs posted. So if you conduct an informational interview, learn about the company, maybe you can ask, oh, I see that you don't have any jobs posted. When typically do you post things? Or are there any exciting departments that you think will probably be hiring in the next 6 months? So this is your way of helping plan for the future. Also, a really helpful thing, how many of you have read a job ad and you don't know what it means? Yes, okay. Tell me more.
It's just like not very specific, or it uses terminology that I'm not accustomed to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So sometimes job ads are not very specific, or they're using jargon that you're not really sure of. So how can an informational interview help you with the job ads that you don't really understand? Any thoughts? Do you
Provide more specific clarification on things.
Sure. So if you contacted someone in the division where you saw the job posting, what would you ask them?
What are the responsibilities of this job? Just like a more kind of expanded view of that, and like what are the expectations? What kind of candidate are they looking for?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So you can ask for a little bit more clarification. And so another way for informational interviewing is sometimes you can ask questions that maybe you wouldn't be comfortable asking in an actual interview. So probably we have salary there. Typically, you might be able to ask for salary ranges for a typical position, but you should never ask anyone's salary themselves. But you could talk about, do people typically get promoted within a year or two? How much vacation time do you get? Sometimes, if you're worried about maternity leave, and if you feel as though you have a good relationship with the person you're talking to, you can ask about those things as well. But all of these things are personal judgment calls. You really need to see what kind of relationship and what kind of discussion you're having. Because sometimes you're able to ask these questions because you have a good connection and the person is very forthright. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So just keep that in mind, that you really, you can't have the same expectations for informational interviewing with each person that you talk to.
I'd like to add just one point to the question that Anne asked about why you might conduct an information interview after reading a job description. And your point is excellent. You have a chance to begin to gather more information about what the actual position might really entail. Then you could take that information and really begin to think about tailoring the content of your resume, how you want to begin to introduce yourself through a cover letter, and the talking points that you'd want to have as you were beginning to engage in the interview process, formal job interview process with an organization. So always thinking about, as a prelude to whatever my next step is going to be, applying for jobs, gathering more information, what's the kind of questioning that I want to ask to be able to glean useful, helpful information that's going to guide my next step in some way. So it just seems like a good example of how you could take that additional information and really use it in a myriad of ways to guide a good bit of your job search process.
Thank you. So are any of you in the middle of your degree program? Yeah, okay. So how do you think informational interviewing would help answer some questions that you have or help you with your career search? Do you have any thoughts?
I'm kind of in the middle. I'm actually a freshman in so I still have many paths I can choose from. So any information interview will help me to decide which career path I'm really interested in or which career path I don't like at all.
Okay, great. So a potential way, if you're at the beginning of your degree program, is to figure out what career paths could potentially be of interest to you. So how do you think talking to someone, as opposed to reading things on a website, or maybe reading things in a database such as the Vault Guides, how do you think talking to someone is different than looking at things on the web?
Honestly, that's this question.
Okay. Do you have any hunches?
I think actually, when you're actually talking with someone who's in the field doing the real work in the field, maybe he has more feeling or personal preference in his work. So yeah, I guess just get more information deeper than just superficial from Wikipedia.
Absolutely. So if you didn't hear in the back, so one advantage in terms of talking to people as opposed to looking on the web or other resources is to get more in-depth, maybe about a person's position, maybe about a company, and you can learn things that maybe aren't published on the general websites. Absolutely. Does anyone have any other thoughts about how maybe if you're at the beginning or the middle of your degree program that informational interviewing could help you? Yes.
It helps solidify whether you're actually interested in that career path, because if you're just reading stuff online, that could be whatever, but talking to someone who's actually doing it, if you see any similarities between yourself and them, or you see yourself doing their job.
Excellent. So in some ways there's a lot of value in talking to someone because in some ways they can be a role model and it can just be helpful to see personal experience come to life rather than reading things generically.
For any who might be contemplating where you want to make your academic home while you're at Cornell in terms of academic departments, especially for the freshmen and perhaps our sophomore or two in the group. Having conversations with people can be a great way to help you begin to formulate ideas about how you want to put together your undergraduate academic experience. Would it be more strategic to consider majoring in X, Y, and Z fields if I was interested in a career in? Or I'm looking at this major as a way to advance to this particular career field, but are there electives and other classes that I should be sure to include in my undergraduate experience? Might be some of the reasons that early on in your undergraduate degree, for example, you might choose to connect with people to help guide your thinking a bit about your academic program.
And that also applies to graduate students as well. If you're struggling to define a thesis topic, or maybe you're thinking about working in a new area, or just trying to work interdisciplinarily, sometimes doing informational interviews with people in the field can help you understand if that's a potential avenue to pursue. So just to summarize a little bit about what we talked, in the middle of your degree program, you can look at potential organizations to work for. Maybe you know that you want to have a certain career, maybe in consulting, and you're wondering what additional skills do you need to be working on in the next few years while you're here at Cornell. Doing an informational interview can be very, very helpful. So what kind of questions could you ask someone if you wanted to learn about what skills to develop? Any thoughts?
You can start by asking them what class they find most useful at Cornell, usually. And then you can maybe follow that up by saying, like, what skills do you feel like you use day-to-day work? They'll probably give you a general answer, like communication skills, and something to follow up on.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are great points. What classes are useful, what skills to use on a daily basis, and you also brought up a really excellent point. You can clarify. So if they say communication skills, you can say, okay, I can see that. What aspect of communication? And it can be very helpful if you know a little bit about what types of communication skills you're interested in. So maybe you really like negotiating conflict. So that's something that you could maybe prompt and say, oh, do you negotiate a lot of conflict at work? Or do you communicate a lot with clients and you try to negotiate their needs with the company needs? So absolutely, that's great. And other things, if you're interested in doing internships or maybe doing some research, doing informational interviews can help you learn about potential opportunities. And just in general, it's great to have practice talking to people. So when you do an informational interview, it's your opportunity to just present yourself very briefly and in a professional manner. And you can see how people react to you. If you say something, you can usually see on their face that, ooh, that seemed a little weird. Or you can just kind of tell what questions get people talking. Or you can also see what people find interesting about you. And at the beginning of your degree program, as Lori mentioned, you can clarify your area of study or learn about potential career paths. And this list is a little bit short, but honestly, all of the things in the middle of your degree and the end of your degree, those are all useful too. So this is just a general timeline, I guess, for the importance of informational interviewing at all steps of your Cornell career. And just to let you know, this presentation will be available online. I think that we'll email it to you as well. So you're welcome to take notes, but you'll also have hard copies.
Great. So Anna and I would like to hear from you. What has your experience been with informational interviewing? How many of you in the audience have actually conducted an information interview? Okay. Who's wanting to share a little bit about what was that experience like? What do you think worked particularly well?
I think my greatest success was asking them at the end if there was anyone else I should be talking to, and that usually resulted in an additional referral.
So did everyone have a chance to hear that? The asking who she was meeting with, if that person might be willing to connect her to some additional colleagues. Always a good strategy and a good thing to be doing. And that was a good outcome of the experience for you. Are there other things about the exchange that you think, in hindsight, as you reflected on it, that you might have done differently or would have yielded perhaps a different result for you?
I think now I know whether it's, I now know I should ask whether it's appropriate to take notes, because some people found that was fine and others said, no, absolutely not, off record.
Sure. So the point about when you're in this this exchange and you have a robust list of questions that you want to be asking the person that you're meeting with, because in an information interview, the reality is that you're guiding the conversation. You are the one who is asking the questions to elicit the kind of information that you're hoping to gather during that exchange. There's going to be a lot of information in probably a relatively short period of time, and a good bit of information. So being very polite and courteous and asking your host, the person you're interviewing, would you allow me to take some notes? May I take some notes to jot down a couple of the things that we talk about and a couple of the ideas that you share with me? And that way then you know how the person feels about whether or not that's something they're comfortable with. So really, really good point. How about you, sir?
I had kind of the same experience. I've conducted a bunch, and kind of the reason I came here is none of them have yielded any sort of, they're just more interviews. Like, I'll go information looking at this person. It's just kind of continuing and not getting a job.
Sure. So it sounds like you are using an information interview as a prelude to your job search. So that's the reason. The key with information interviewing, this process, is to, before you engage in even sending a written communication, and certainly before you engage in the actual exchange, you have to be very clear in your mind about where you are at, what step in the process are you at, and what kind of information and advice are you seeking. And you need to really think about, formulate, and maybe write out those questions, but have all of that ready to yield some productive, useful information. So we're going to have a couple of different examples to share with you, both from the written communication initially, asking whether or not someone may conduct an information interview, and we actually have a couple of video clips that we're going to share with you, and we're going to break down what we think were the effective components of that, as well as perhaps some things that the person could have done differently to yield the desired result. So I think we're going to absolutely address your concern, if you will, or frustration with the information interview process. To be honest with you, it's not uncommon for students to say, I'm just not really finding information interviewing particularly useful. So we have to think about what's our expectation, what information are we seeking, are we asking appropriate questions to get the kind of information that's going to yield the desired result. That's really the key in this process. A couple of important things to remember that, again, we're hitting upon some themes, and we'll keep coming back to these. The person requesting this, so each of you sitting in the room, if you are about to request an information interview, you're going to be guiding the conversation. You're in the driver's seat. And it is, in order to be effective in navigating the conversation, you have to do a lot of preparatory thinking and a lot of preparatory homework in advance of that conversation. And we're going to talk about what that is. A couple more thoughts. And just being really, really clear about where you're at, what kind of information you're looking for, and then developing effective questions. And really to remember that you are asking for information, not a job. In the actual exchange, the person that you're meeting with, rarely, if ever, is the person you're meeting with going to be able to, in the moment, say, I've got a job for you. Most people simply aren't in that position. And if they are in the position to offer you a job, or they happen to know about a job within their organization, they do not yet know whether or not you are someone that they'd like to risk their reputation on, internal to the organization. In telling of that, they just learned in a staff meeting that morning that they've received a grant that they submitted, that they need 2 additional staff people to manage various components of that. They don't yet know whether or not you might be someone based on your interests, your skill set, your background, to tell you about that coveted opening. So part of it is, through this process of gathering really, really essential information to guide your steps, you also are beginning to position yourself and feature yourself, reveal yourself as a potential, a serious, interesting, professional person who might make a contribution to the organization. So before you can conduct an information interview, you have to ask someone whether or not can have their time to do that. And typically, you would be writing an email to make that request. So crafting an effective informational interview really takes a little bit of time and thought, and it's an art in getting all of the essential pieces in. And your goal in the email communication is that it's to the point, that it's very purposeful, and that it is very professional in terms of tone and content. So let's take a look at a couple of example emails. Everyone take a moment, please, and read through this, and then we'd like to know your thoughts. Okay, so how would you feel if you received that email from a student? Subject line says student seeking help. Anyone? Yes.
The address is like, it's just hello, and this is so this is like just a generic email sent out to everyone.
So this young woman feels that the hello, the salutation, could be perceived as very generic, and the person who wrote this might have been sending this to a lot of people and didn't take the time to personalize the email. Other thoughts? Yes.
It looks like they're just asking for a job, and then also not asking for any kind of interview. Just like the second sentence after the my goal is to enter a job. I would appreciate any advice you have. That just makes it sound like they just want the person to respond with like a few bullet points in the email.
Think about receiving this, and if you really were interested in helping this student, do you have enough information to go on to begin to pinpoint what kind of advice would this student find helpful? Do you know whether or not this student is early on in their degree program? Or do you have a sense of they're within 6 months of completion of that degree and they're really more in their job search mode? Or are they really more now beginning to, I don't know that we have enough information to go on to begin to formulate a response to the student. Other observations? What do you think is effective about this email?
It's short.
It's short?
Like very clear, organized. I mean, like this, the first paragraph is like who he is, who she is, and then the paragraph is her goal, and then the last paragraph is like appreciation, thank you. So I mean, even if like I think it can be certainly improved, but I think the organization is okay.
So good organization and accomplished one of the goals of the communication. It's succinct, it's short, and it's to the point. Yes?
Should you put your name like close to the beginning of the email, or is it fine as it is?
You might choose to do that, but I think it's also perfectly acceptable to probably sign it the way it is here as well. Sometimes students begin with, my name is Karen Jones, and if that is a comfortable way of you beginning your communication, I don't think that's, not appropriate, but I think this is probably appropriate as well. Is it polite? Do you think there's like a polite tone to it? I truly appreciate you taking your time. So there are some components of this that are effective, but maybe a couple of additional pieces that we could implement, or a couple of additional strategies that we could implement to perhaps make this even a little bit more effective. So one of the things to think about is how you're using your subject line. You know how much email you receive and what prompts you to open an email, and to discern whether or not an email is something that you want to read, might be spam, might be very generic, 1,000 other Cornell students are receiving it, etc. So think about using the subject line as strategically as possible. Sometimes being a little bit too informal will not be appreciated by the person who's the recipient of this. If you are contacting someone that you don't know at all, or you don't know very well, you want to respect the formality of the process and be as polite, professional, and a bit more formal in your Dear Ms. Jones, dear Professor Eden. The other thing that you pointed out is that we have to help the reader, the recipient of this email, the person that you're requesting to have the information interview with, we have to help them understand, what are you looking for? What kind of information is going to be useful to you? So in that preliminary communication, setting the stage with, in particular, I welcome your thoughts and suggestions on, really will begin to frame for the reader what it is. Oh, I want to be sure to share this with Susan when I talk with her. I want to be sure to talk about this experience. So thinking about using the email in a strategic way to succinctly begin to give an idea of the kind of information you're seeking. That ties into trying not to be vague about what you're seeking. And the other thing that we want to really think about in this email is I look forward to hearing from you soon. Protocol suggests that you're asking this person if they would be willing to allow you to connect with them, to have a bit of their time, that you really need to follow up with them to be sure that this is something that they're amenable to, that you take the initiative in finding the mutually agreed upon time and method to connect. So think about that also, not relying on the other person to initiate the next step in the process. Any comments? Yes?
When you say about using a vague subject, what kind of subject line do you think it's not?
Sure. We're going to show you an example of that in a moment, and we're happy to talk about that. Are you okay with holding on for a moment to see an example? Great. Nancy?
I think proofreading is also really important because the Senate is using a space, and some alumni or professionals, especially if they're talking about communication or something, will think that that student isn't attentive to detail now and say, okay, what should I?
In all communications, including your resume and cover letter and this type of communication also, that attention to detail can speak volumes about the attention to detail you'll bring on a project within a team group, in a research lab, etc. So that's a really good point. Thank you. So here's a second example. It is a bit longer. We've provided 3 different chunks of text, and I think we'd like you to read the first part of the email, and we'll debrief that, and then the second and third. Okay, let me have you actually read the second paragraph also. In contrast to the first email, this person used a more specific subject line, so Cornell student seeking informational interview. You could even say your name or a reference from a particular person, so that's how you could, especially if there's a mutual acquaintance or a tie to the same organization or college or university. Being very formal, this email had a bit more of a sort of formal in terms of its salutation, the greeting to the person, definitely provided more information about yourself, the writer self, as well as the kind of information, the specific things that they'd like to hit upon. And we're very proactive in initiating next steps. So now we're going to give you a chance to see what an actual informational interview looks like.
Yeah, and we're actually going to show 2 examples. So just to give you a little prelude, so this is a scripted, actually there's 2 scripted informational interviews that one of our peer advisors, Johnsy, very kindly agreed to do with me. So it's a very rough video, and it's in real live time in the audience or in the office, so you can even hear the coffee maker going. The camera's even a little tilted, so it's not going to win any Academy Awards or anything. But what we'll do is we'll show you the first one and stop at strategic points, and you'll share your thoughts, and then we'll show the second one in its entirety.
Hello, hey there, Jane. I know I'm a little late, but I thought you totally understand. I missed my train and I got lost coming here, and I had to get a cup of coffee because I pulled an all-nighter yesterday.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Ryan. But since you're over 20 minutes late and I have an appointment in 5 minutes, I'm afraid that we only have a few minutes to talk.
Okay. What are your thoughts? Is this interview off to a good start? No. Why not? Yes.
The person who like their interview is late for it.
Okay, great. So you showed up late. What are some other bad signs? How about the greeting? Did you catch that? It was, "Hey, Jane." Is that a good way to start off your first professional interaction? No. Okay. So anything else? So he also gave very unprofessional reasons for why he didn't show up. So if there's all kinds of things going on personally, they don't care. They just want to talk to you. They want to provide advice. So, not really relevant that you had to get coffee, especially even sharing that you had to pull an all-nighter. That implies that maybe you're not good at managing your time, or maybe you're not very responsible. So let's see if the interview gets any better.
Okay, well, thank you for meeting with me even for 5 minutes. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I don't know. What do you do?
I thought I mentioned in my email that I'm involved in designing cars.
Okay, is it getting better? No. Okay, yeah, it's a little ridiculous, but so what are some of the pitfalls? What is John C. not doing very well? Yes.
He had no questions prepared.
Mm-hmm. Very good. No questions prepared, and what else? Yes.
He didn't do his research.
Exactly. So what do you mean he didn't do his research?
He doesn't even know his interviewer is working.
Exactly. He didn't even know what I did. How am I going to help him? How are we going to have a productive conversation in 5 minutes? So, just keep in mind that when people say yes to an informational interview, typically they're doing it because they want to help people. And the best way that you can feel as though you're being helpful is if the person is very specific about what they need help with. So, I don't think I'm going to be very helpful to John C. during this interview.
Wow, designing cars. So how much does that bring in per year? And how long did it take you to wind up in this nice corner office with a team of designers working for you?
Well, I'm sorry, Ryan, but I'm really not comfortable answering those personal questions. Are you perhaps wondering about my career path and whether there's opportunities for advancement within my organization?
Okay, more ridiculousness. So, what rules did he break? You're laughing.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's about salaries and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. So asking about salaries, making comments about my office, which actually isn't that great of a corner office. So, yeah. And what did I do in my response to him? What did I do? Did I try to make his answer better? Yes. Okay. What did I do?
Kind of like dodge the question.
Yep, exactly. I dodged the personal question, and I tried to save him. I tried to say, oh, okay, I understand maybe you don't know you're not supposed to ask about salaries. Let's try to make it more general about advancing opportunities or growing within a company. Let's see what John C. does with that one.
Kind of, although I'm mainly interested in earning a lot of money. Designing cars are cool. For my engineering senior project, I designed a new windshield for cars, and it was a great process. I got to consider a variety of factors, like how fast rain hits the windshield, what materials best for windshield wipers. So I got an A on the project.
Well, that's nice. But actually, I'm not really sure about what you're talking about because I design batteries for electric cars.
Okay. So any problems with what just happened there? I'll give you a hint. How much time did he spend talking and how much time did I spend talking? Who won? Did he win or did I win? Yes.
No one won. You're both wasting your time. You guys don't waste trying to do it.
That's an excellent response. So, yes. So, in general, make sure that when you're doing an interview yes, it's okay to talk about yourself a little bit, especially if it's relevant to what the person is doing, but don't give long monologues about what you did, especially if it doesn't relate to what they do.
And unfortunately, I have time just for one last brief question.
Okay, so the real reason why I'm here is because I'm looking for a job now, and I really need one because I have huge student loans and my parents just lost their house, so I won't be able to move in with them after graduation. So can you introduce me to some of your manager and give me a recommendation for anyone in your company?
I'm sorry, but we're not hiring right now, and I don't make hiring decisions in this company.
Okay, thanks anyway.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so how did that interview end? On a good note? No. Okay, why not? Would you like to share why not? Yes.
Oh, well, he asked for a job, and he was providing all this background information about why he needed one, which obviously you don't care about. You just want to give information about what you do.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's nice, when people feel comfortable sharing personal information, but people aren't going to give you a job because they feel bad for you. They're going to give you a job because you're qualified and you're going to add something to the company. So, absolutely. Okay. So, just to summarize some of the pitfalls then, just to summarize a little bit. So, he was unprofessional, unprepared, he asked vague questions, he didn't respect my time. You'll notice that I actually had to say, we're almost out of time. And he talked about himself, he asked for a job, and essentially he came in because he thought that he could get a job. Okay, now we'll just show the other interview, and we'll just show it in its entirety.
Good morning, Ms. Smith. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with me.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure, Ryan. And I'm so glad you're able to come in a little bit early because my schedule is really busy today.
Thank you. So, as you may remember from my email, I'm finishing my master's degree at Cornell in May this year, and I've been studying science policy. Right now, I'm exploring what type of positions best fit my skills and interests in communicating science policy to the general public. When I saw your LinkedIn profile, I was intrigued by your work on communicating the impacts of fracking to upstate New Yorkers, and could you tell me more about what your responsibilities are in this position?
Sure. So I actually supervise a team of 4 people, and together we're in charge of creating a monthly newsletter that goes out to all upstate New Yorkers. We interview individuals in the local, state, and federal government, and we keep abreast of policy changes and write about them in the newsletter.
That sounds wonderful. I edited an e-newsletter for my student group and really enjoyed the challenge of summarizing 30-minute interviews into 20-word pieces. What skills do you find most helpful in your position, and do you have any recommendations for how I can develop these skills?
Those are really great questions. So I find that project management skills are essential to make sure that all of my team members are coordinated and that we produce our e-newsletter on time. Communication is also really important, both in terms of writing and editing the newsletter, and in resolving differing opinions among team members. So I was able to get these skills actually by working for my college newspaper, and there are some excellent project management books that I highly recommend. You know what? I'd be happy to look them up, and I'll email the titles to you.
Thank you. I would really appreciate that. I see we're almost out of time, so I was hoping I can ask you one last question.
Absolutely.
So, this has been a very helpful and interesting discussion, and I'm very interested in learning more about the project management aspect of communicating science policy. So, is there anyone else you think I should talk to as I explore potential career paths?
So, yeah, actually there's several people I can think of that would be great to talk to. And I think that actually one might be hiring soon. So, you know what I'll do? I'll look up their names and I'll include them in my email along with the book titles for the project management.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It was nice to meet you.
Okay. So, yes, it's very scripted, very staged. But what are your thoughts? Was that one any better? Yes. Okay. What are some things that you liked? Or that you thought were better? Yes, in the back.
That he had done extensive research on the person who he was interviewing. That makes a lot of difference.
Okay.
Because the person knows that you're actually interested in.
Great. So just to summarize what you said, he had done a lot of research, and so he was able to ask very good questions. Do you think he got good responses back? Yes. Why do you think that is?
Because he was trying to get information for himself, but he started off in an area that was comfortable for the interviewer to start off with. So the relation was very flowing. It was fluid.
I'm so glad you brought up that point. So if people are volunteering their time, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to help you. I mean, if someone asks you to do an informational interview, and if you're very busy, you're going to be more likely to say no if you feel as though you have to do a lot of work or there's really high expectations. So if you really make it as easy as possible for someone to share their experience, that's the best situation. So thank you. Any other thoughts? Yes?
There was also some sense of follow-up because you were going to send him an email and he was going to contact other people, whereas in the bad example, there was absolutely no sense of that.
Great. So there's also a sense of follow-up. So I was going to send him some names and some books, and also when he was speaking, he mentioned interest in the project management resources. So it felt very dynamic, even though it was a script, that it seemed as though a connection was made. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I have a question, actually. When he said, I think we're almost out of time, if the person that you're interviewing doesn't tell you outright that they have a certain amount of time, should you ask them if there's a time constraint on the interview?
That's a really good question. My instincts are, try to keep it to the time that you say, because that's being very professional. That's being very respectful of their time. Some people might not feel very comfortable cutting it off, and so since you're initiating it, you should also close it. So there might be opportunities, where if you feel as though the discussion could go further, you could maybe say, oh, this has been really helpful. If I have any additional questions, may I follow up with a question by email or by phone? But what are your thoughts, Lori?
Yeah, no, just exactly that. And if you're sensing the person is very generous with his or her time, you might say, I want to be sensitive to your time. I know that we had prearranged for half an hour, and that might be an entree to the interviewer saying, I have 15 more minutes and I'm happy to share that with you. But that absolutely shows respect for your host's time and schedule, and that you were going to abide by what you originally agreed upon.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes?
You said you'd email him. What happens if they forget? And I've been in situations where they forget, and I send them essentially a reminder email asking for it again, and they don't respond. What should you do?
That's a great question. So one way to help them, encourage them to not forget, is to send a follow-up thank you email, and I'll talk about the format of that in a little bit. But yes, you can say, I'm really looking forward to the project management resources or the contacts. And if they don't respond to that or they don't do it, yes, you can send a follow-up email. Maybe you could even do, I don't know about a phone call. I would maybe contact them twice, and if it's not possible, you just have to let it go, because ultimately they're doing you a favor. They're being kind to you. So I don't know if there's ways that you can make it a little bit easier. So for example, if you wanted book titles, maybe you could do some research and you could just say, oh, I found these book titles. Are there any of these that you might recommend? So then they can say yes. So just see if there's ways that if you really need this information, how can you make it as easy as possible for them to help you? Yeah. So great. All right. Well, we could analyze this for a long time, but we won't. So once again, professional demeanor. He didn't call me Hey Jane. Essentially, we talked about all of these things. All right. So the big yes.
Before we go on to the next thing, just one thing. I know students get nervous during informational interviews, and this was a scripted thing, but you should have your questions in front of you, but not a full script, so that you wouldn't respond and look down. You are engaging and having eye contact with the person, so try to practice with your friends or something like that, just having it as an outline.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, that is one of the downfalls of having a scripted show.
Your goal is a conversation with the person, but doing all of that important thinking and preparation prior to the moment you interact with the person.
Great. Okay, so the follow-up. I know that there's some questions about that. So, as I mentioned, be sure to send a thank you note. And Lori had this nice point about thanking people in your network is an ongoing process. So ultimately, if people are helping you, you don't want to be known as the person who's always asking for things. Instead, really try to make it something just something very natural. And we'll talk about ways that you can maintain regular contact without making it seem as though you're asking for things, and just interacting with people. And once again, staying in touch does not equal reaching out just when you need something. So that doesn't leave a very favorable impression. And one thing that's helpful is that if you are doing a lot of informational interviews, be sure to keep track of it, because that will help you as the years go on or the months go on for you to really understand, what did that person help me with? Are there opportunities now that I've learned something that I can share with them how their information has helped me? And so one question that a lot of students seem to have is, I send a thank you note, but how do I set it up so that I can initiate further contact? And so here's just sort of some flow charts to demonstrate how one event can cascade into different events. So for example, if you thank them for resources and suggestions, you can share your own resources. You might feel as though you don't have anything to offer, but you know what? You're smart. You have resources. You read. Sometimes, as a professional, I find it very helpful when my colleagues say, oh, I ran across this article today, thought you might find it of interest. That's really nice, because sometimes, I'm not always good at checking the news, or I'm not good at keeping up with journals. So it's really thoughtful for people just to kind of send it that way. Or if you hear about interesting events, or maybe if you met someone that had a really interesting background and might be compatible with the person you talked with, you can also just say, oh, I met this person and found that they were very interesting, and maybe suggest ways that they might be interested in contacting them. And then, if they are helping you and if they're providing advice, sometimes it's nice to know what happened. So maybe in a year or 5 years, sometimes it's nice just to kind of get an email out of the blue and hear, oh, because of your advice, because of your suggestion, I found this job, or I decided to go in this career path. Because especially if you're interested in the same field as them, once you graduate, you're their colleague. You can get a job in a company similar to theirs, and you could be meeting them at conferences, or you could be working with them on projects.
You may really value the opportunity to connect with people several years down the road when you're contemplating a career change. You're contemplating a different role within an organization. And thinking back to the invaluable information that you might have gleaned from someone, you really would welcome their thoughts on X, Y, and Z to guide your next steps as you're contemplating your career change. So that following up process, that thanking them and staying in contact, can be over the course of, your undergraduate experience, but even once, and your graduate experience, but once you leave Cornell and you're out in the world doing whatever, you may welcome the chance to come back to reconnect for some additional advice.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing in terms of resources I just thought of, if you are connected with them via LinkedIn, or somehow you learn about where they're located, let's say that they move to a new location, or maybe they're going to a conference in an area, a very easy way to reach out to them or give resources is that if you've heard of a really good restaurant and you know that they like Thai food, maybe you send them the name of a great restaurant. Or if they're moving to an area that you're familiar with, maybe you can just let them know that you grew up there and you'd be happy to connect them to anything. So think very, very broadly. There's so many different ways that you can be helpful to people, and all of them can be very valuable. So another thing you can do is, if you highlight interesting aspects of the conversation, that can set the framework further on. You say, oh, I was so interested in the project management, and then you can send them interesting articles, or maybe give them updates on conferences or that type of thing.
Something you learned in a lecture that was relevant to something that they're working on in their organization that might be a reason to reconnect and share something. Mm-hmm. All those reasons.
Yep. Another thing is you can say, because of my informational interview with you, I'm going to do these things. So you've told them what you're going to do. It's a great excuse to follow up a little bit later and give them progress. And it doesn't have to be a long email. You could just say, oh, it's been 6 months since I talked to you, and you gave me this great suggestion, and this is what I found, or these are the experiences that I found very, very useful. And farther down the line, you can let them know how it influenced your career choice, or if you decided to get additional skills. So, have any of you used these techniques before when you've interacted with people? No. Would you feel comfortable using them? Maybe? Yeah? Okay. Any of them that you think would be especially useful for the people you're talking
hours, and the person who you hope to speak with in the future can kind of touch base with their own existing colleague and say, oh, okay, do you think it would be worth my time? And it's fresh in everyone's memory.
That's a great point. So if you didn't hear in the back, following up very quickly and meeting people that you're referred to, if you do that in a timely fashion, one, it's very good because people will remember this, and also it shows that you're professional, that you get things done very quickly, and that you're given a task and you follow through with it. So all of these are ways to show that you can be a very good colleague or just a contact. And then, as you had mentioned, one thing you can do if you don't ask in the interview, you can ask in the thank you note if they have any recommendations for colleagues that you can connect with as you're exploring career options. And so you mentioned that you talked to them. You could maybe just mention, oh, I found this part of their work very interesting. And then, as you're more established professionally, maybe you have the opportunity to invite them to events where they can meet new people, so you're giving it back to them. So, just really quickly, there's other ways that you can maintain contact. So you can send an occasional note on meaningful days. So in terms of holidays, I would caution you to be very careful about religious holidays. You don't want to assume anything. I've heard that sometimes people will send thank you notes on very random holidays, say Groundhog Day or St. Patrick's Day. The reason for that is because people typically don't get a lot of, happy Groundhog Day notes, so that you'll have a greater chance of being remembered as someone who likes groundhogs. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you attended a great conference or a great internship, you can just let them know and say, oh, I did an internship at this company. And you never know. Maybe they're interested in learning more about the project that you worked on at that company. Or maybe they recently had a colleague that went there. You're really opening the door for potential connections.
Or you're simply coming back and saying, that was an amazing experience, and I heeded your suggestion, and I pursued this. But I'm now thinking that I really might like to explore this particular aspect, and I'd welcome the chance to talk with you again about what next summer should look like as a way to. So it's how you really begin to, you're not just reconnecting with people for it's 6 months out, I need to send a note to the person I spoke with 2 years ago, but that you're really looking to tap into this kind person's expertise on some career field or industry or something that you eventually hope to be part of. And you're tapping into all of that insider knowledge, and I mean that in a very positive way, that can help shape and guide what each of your next steps will be.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic point. Thank you. And just to reiterate, you can't expect this from everyone. You're going to have informational interviews that are terrible. You're going to be so happy that it's only 10 minutes because you do not connect. The person is not giving you answers that are useful, or they're really tired. So there's different levels of maintaining contact with people.
Absolutely.
So just keep that in mind.
And one or two people that you really have rich, ongoing exchanges with might be your goal for the kind of mentoring and expert advice that you'd like to be able to tap into over the course of your educational experience at Cornell, or over the course of the early part of your career.
And then you can also use social media. You can request a LinkedIn connection. I would just say don't be offended if they don't accept it. There might be limitations in terms of being able to accept connections maybe from students or people outside the organization. You don't know. But it's worth asking. Maybe if you use Twitter, you can follow them. And then once again, you can share lots of information. And especially if you're connecting with alumni, it's wonderful to receive news from students about events on campus, especially if you knew that, for example, if they were involved in sports, or they really liked eating at a certain restaurant or something like that.
Just had a spotting of the dragon during Dragon Day, something like that. That's just this wonderful remembrance of a time spent here at Cornell. Can be a neat way to just reach out.
Exactly. So this is just a brief overview of informational interviewing, and we do have time for a few questions, I think. So, yes.
Just to be clear, when you say thank you note, do you mean an email or a paper mailed note?
That's a good question. I've heard mixed opinions about that. So
maybe you think about the immediacy factor right after interacting with someone. You want to fire off an email while it's fresh in your mind and let them know how you feel. And think about following up with a handwritten note shortly after that also. I just continue to reflect on some of the things you talked about, some of the suggestions you offered regarding my job search, and I wanted to write again and thank you for your time. You might choose to do both.
The email is fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. Have you run into this problem before, or what?
No, just some people say who, have a very nice card and who, a nice script, it creates a stronger impression than just an email. So I was wondering if there's some strategy about that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's about your personality and how you like to represent yourself. So, and Nancy has a suggestion in the back.
If you're meeting with an alum and you decide that you want to send a regular snail mail card, I'd say go to the David store and get, something that reminds them of Cornell, because it might be a nice trip, but they also might tack it on their word and always think of you afterwards.
Whatever resonates for you. What other questions?
We answered everything? All right. That's great. Oh, yeah.